Hello, my name is Christy Dentry, and welcome to Valley to Vietnam. Valley to Vietnam is a joint effort between Sacramento Public Library and the Vietnam Veterans of America Chapter 500. It is our intent to trace the arc of experience between Sacramento and Vietnam for our local Vietnam-era veterans. Today we are joined by Greg McNeill of the United States Marine Corps, 3rd Battalion, 5th Regiment, Kilo Company. So, hello Greg.
Hi Christy.
First of all, just want to say welcome home.
Thank you.
So you were Sacramento born and bred.
Yes, I was.
Could you tell us a little bit about growing up in Sacramento and what it was like living in such an urban center?
I particularly thought I was particularly lucky in the fact that raised downtown Sacramento in those areas around McKinley Park and had the access to both downtown, an real urban area. At that particular time, there were businesses down there, but a lot of missions, and it was part of college at that time, Skid Row. It's now a very popular area, old Sacramento. But we loved it. We'd go up in the abandoned buildings and catch pigeons and experience life downtown. Mm-hmm. And it was very close. In our backyard also, there's a large area of nothing but outdoors area, like country, right down in the city, and it went all the way to the river. And we had the river and the train, and we jumped, ride trains, and from one area to another. If nothing more than go up a few blocks, just the thrill of it all. But downtown was a really neat area, and it was the capital of Sacramento. When I was young, there was no freeways. It was 16th Street, Highway 160 right. was the highway, and there was 50, but it was really a two-lane. It wasn't a highway at all like we see today. I went to Fremont Elementary when I first went to school, and then at Washington Elementary later from about 2nd grade on. Sutter Junior High School, right after they had rebuilt and closed down the old one and rebuilt the new one, we moved in there. And then Sac High School, I went there prior to going to the service.
So at Sac High School, as you were a teenager, you were involved in a lot of different groups and activities. Could you tell us a little bit about those and some local Sacramento spots that you frequented?
The neighborhood I was raised in was predominantly Mexican-American, and there was myself and maybe two or maybe three other Caucasian people. So I just love the Mexican Americans in the sense that their families were always so open. So in this group of Mexican Americans, we kind of formed the group C Street, Barrio Dos Dos, and we kind of hung out. We'd mainly go into dances. Boy, there were lots of dances back then. We'd go to spots around town. There was Shakey's Pizza Parlor in East Sac. There was a bowling alley downtown Sacramento. And Sacramento K Street, we used to cruise that. And that was a big thing back when we were kids, cruising K Street. Yep. You know, you met a lot of people. A lot of times traffic moved real slow, a lot of conversation between cars. But somehow when I was a young chick, completely separated from the neighborhood and my family, I joined a vacation Bible school one time and went for 7 years unrelated to anybody in my neighborhood. Every Sunday religiously but at the same time during the week, maybe not so religious, and again, hanging out with the guys and doing the things that teenagers weren't supposed to do but were bound to do, and that included drinking and carousing and staying up, all that kind of stuff. I also joined the Cub Scouts for a number of years. My dad was involved with that. And then I joined the Boy Scouts. Later I joined the Civil Air Patrol. I once worked at the State Fair setting it up, and then worked the kiddie rides, and I think I was barely legal to work. I don't know. It was my very first, I had to get my Social Security to work this job. And so I was 15, 16 years old. After that I worked at Grant's department store downtown as a dishwasher. Then I also David Candy Company. And I worked at Mercy San Juan Hospital as a dishwasher just prior to me getting my request if I had any objection to going into service. I also joined a group. It was actually summer employment. Sacramento Area Opportunity Center is what it was, and they had a summer work project for youth. And we cleaned up fields around town and cleaned up things. And out of this, they started a group called the Youth Congress. And its goal was to gain money from the federal government via the state and get training, and at that time it was key punch, I think it was, before computers ever got sophisticated. There was training for that and training on a number of different areas for kids of our age, and again we're talking 15, 16, 17 years old kids, but getting them off the streets, getting the thing. And out of that started this youth congress. And we petitioned an area to allow us to have this group here, so we had to go downtown and see the city hall and get the okay and get signatures from so many people through the neighborhood. Somehow the thing, I was the one elected out of my particular area to run, and was elected the first year for the Youth Congress. We had a group building downtown on, I think it was 14th and E Street. And again, a number of functions for kids. We had color guards and drill teams and things of that sort, but it was a good youth project.
And so you figured that you would go ahead and enlist.
Exactly. So I figured, well, I didn't have any children. I wasn't going to college. So I really figured that was just a pre-letter to saying, well, then you're going to be drafted. Because I, at that time, really didn't understand how the draft system worked, the lottery system, how the numbers. I just figured if your number came up and they decided you were the right condition, they just took you. My brother had spent already about 13 years, and the Marine Corps would not only take me, but they'd let me have 120 days to screw around and have a good time before I went back in the service. So I figured, man, what a deal.
You went in October of 1968, and you went to various trainings before being deployed to Vietnam. Could you explain to us a little bit about what trainings you went into? And
well, my boot camp was in San Diego, and for Marines that makes a big deal whether you went to France, Paris Island, or went to Hollywood, San Diego. And I'm a Hollywood Marine. Boot camp, again, just like you see in all the movies, was just as shocking, just as really, all the hair off, shut up, sit down, you know, you ain't got nothing to do. Send all your clothes home because you ain't going nowhere. I think that was the idea of boot camp, to take any over pride you had in yourself, overachievement. If you were a super athlete and could do 100 push-ups or 1,000 push-ups, it didn't make any difference because they were going to find your limit and break you. That was the whole idea, to find your limit to everything and then take that limit and build you up stronger. So if you had a high self-esteem, they're going to knock you down and they're going to build you back up. If you had a low self-esteem, they didn't have to knock you down very far, but they're going to build you back up. And after boot camp, I was 0311. That's the only MOS I have, and all Marines are grunts, and that's what I was, and that's all I was. Out of that, we went to BITS, basic infantry training. And again, if you were a machine gunner or a mortar man or something like that, you went to another BITS. You may have gone to the same ITR, but you'd go to another, and you'd get more specialized training in the mortar, in the M60 machine gun. And not that you'd end up with that when you got over to Vietnam, but that was your basic MOS, and you had an MOS for that. It was there in BITS, some in ITR, but mainly in BITS, you kind of got a taste of they showed you examples of punji pits, and they showed you examples of maybe booby traps. Although none of the booby traps they showed me in our training, I ran across. We ran across different things, and again, I guess just getting the heads up was a good idea. And I think our knowledge at that particular time were always, you know, like a year behind. You know, they'd come back and train the stuff they learned last year, and lo and behold, the Vietnamese had learned new ways, and it wasn't that way anymore.
Let's fast forward to June of 1969 when you were deployed to Vietnam as a part of K Company. Could you explain a little bit to us what conditions were like when you first got there and what you encountered?
Again, like all, I think every serviceman is, well, if we're going to Vietnam, what is it? Why don't I have a weapon now? Of course, we landed inside of a base. It seems quite secure. Then we were shipped out to our particular thing, and I was shipped off to An Hoa. So I went to Kilo Company 35, and it was in An Hoa, which is evidently a private air base at one time owned by some farmer or something, as the story goes. And we landed there, and we, again, got introduced, spent about, I don't remember now, 3-4 days there. Then I was helicoptered where the unit was, and they were climbing Charlie Ridge and going up in the mountains to be a blocking force for an operation we were doing at Durham Peak. And I think it's my first experience with being out in the bush with fellow Marines, what we were doing. Rifle was on back. I had an M16 at that time. Again, the very first night I hit that there, they set me out on a listening post all by myself, where you're to stay awake for 3 to 4 hours, and all you can do is every 15 minutes they call you and you initiate a sound on your radio. You don't say anything, and that night just poured and rained, and all I could think of was that this is how they. When you stop sit rapping, they realize your throat's been cut, and then they realize someone's come up the hill. I think at this time I look back at it, they probably had their eye on me all night, and it was just more of a, what's this guy, is he going to stay awake all night? And my first experience with that, we went up and did this blocking forest relief with another group, all Granite Mountains, and my first experience with the radio there. We had radio up there, people have little transistors, and they had like gun smoke on the radio and things that I could relate to, and real nostalgic, especially at this particular time. Getting again, we had had some rounds fired around us, nothing particular, no real action, but there you could obviously that we were in a combat zone. No real scary moments really, other than a couple of rounds making you duck now and then, but nothing particular. Came across a couple of zapper camps and our maneuvers up there. But it was really neat to hear these radio stations. It kind of brought that little piece of home back. Kilo Company would go on this, be a blocking force, a particular thing in the mountains. Then they'd go maybe back to An Hoa, the rear, and they'd watch the perimeter there for a month. And then they'd be shipped off to a valley. And we'd be in the An Hoa Basin doing maneuvers down through there, chasing Charlie all over those particular areas. I guess that was the biggest part of it. They would just drag on. You'd walk and walk and walk, not knowing half the time. You'd get a little map that just showed you the grid. You have no relationship to it and the coast or north. You knew which way you walked till you ran out of map, and they gave you a new map. And you had no idea where you particularly were. And you get hot, tired, frustrated, don't want to watch, you start getting sloppy, so on and so forth, and somebody get a booby trap, and suddenly get all straightened out again, and it would go on that. Suddenly a sniper round would go over your head, or it might even catch somebody. It would suddenly you run into somebody, and you'd have maybe 15, 20 minutes of firefight, and then suddenly it was like pushing on the wind. It wasn't there anymore. It was so frustrating and so nerve-wracking that a lot of, it just, I think that was the biggest problem with it. It was nothing. Then it would be all intense. The rounds would be around you. There'd be incoming coming across. There'd be, depending day or night, you'd see tracers and not tracers, your heart in your throat, and so on and so forth. And then nothing for enough time to let you come complacent.
Could you tell us a little bit about the weapon that you were assigned and what the conditions were like receiving supplies and ammunition?
Yeah. Well, Marine Corps, first to fight and all that kind of stuff. They also expect you to fight with whatever you have. I went over there and got to 16, but within a particular time, they needed somebody to take on the M79 Grenade Launcher, referred to as a blooper, and it's a grenade launcher. It basically threw grenades. It also had gas rounds and pop-ups that would illuminate the sky, and had napalm. You could shoot out of it. Had a number of different things, but again, one individual round at a time. Once you fired it, you had to open it up, discard the old round, and put the new round in and refire it. I can remember being at times carrying. I also became a squad leader. I continued carrying it, although I did try to pass off a couple times. But regardless, the guy would be a good replacement for me as far as firing it. Could type or something, and he'd be taken back to the rear for some particular reason. But I got caught. It was kind of a weapon I really got used to, but being in the Marine Corps, I can remember at one time being fired on by a hill. We were coming out a trail, and we turned and started to assault. As we did, I fired a round up in the area, and the other blooper man from the other platoon came over and says, "Man, I don't have any rounds. How many rounds you got?" He had fired a round that year, and I had a total of 5 HE rounds left. I gave him 2, but this was typical. Again, it wasn't uncommon for us to pass Army groups with brand new, shiny, what's that? What is, look at this, a blooper of an M79 Grenade Launcher and an M16 together. What is that? They'd see things. When I came originally on Earth, the Marine Corps still had bazookas. The first month or two I was there, they had bazookas and flamethrowers. The flamethrowers at that time made sense, but bazookas, I just didn't see it. But I had wore the same utilities for as much as a month one time, and before we got resupplied again, most of this time out in the bush, most of the time, and again, not getting any wrapper. Again, we probably melded right into the environment just fine as far as not smelling abnormal, like clean. Because I was a squad leader, because I had the experience with the blooper, they brought in an automatic blooper, and they said, McNeill, we'd like you to be the squad leader for this, and we'll give you a gunman, and we'll give you an assistant gunman, and an ammo guy. So I got all three of these guys myself. We got this automatic blooper, we set it up. It was kind of great. Not many people, we had a clip version. Now there's a Gatling kind that comes out of belt, and the clip, I think people on helicopters would have seen that, and we had it. We were all excited. We were the M79 squad or fire team, and we had it for a whole month, and then they took it. What do you mean to take it away from us? Yeah, another company's going to get it now. You go back to where you were. I went back to my squad, and that's what it was. Nice weapons we got, they were rotated through our area.
You were wounded in the An Hoa Valley, and then medevac to Japan and did recovery in Okinawa, and then from there you went back to Vietnam, and then you had the chance to do some R&R, a 7-day R&R in Bangkok. Could you tell us a little bit about your experiences there?
I think I was overwhelmed by the whole thing. Again, still fairly young. I don't think I had even hit 19 at that time, but just 19, fairly inexperienced, drinking scotch and Coke. If anybody knows anything about scotch, that's not the way you drink it, but at that time it sounded good to me, and it sounded tough when I ordered to the bartender. But when I went on my 7-day R&R, that was kind of interesting. That was after I had come back to the company and became squad leader, been there a couple months, and wasn't far from going home, a couple months from going home myself, and my R&R came up. So I chose Bangkok, and I went. And gee, we hadn't had anything to drink, and we sat there and filled out what hotel do you want to stay at, what do you want to do, what do you want to see, blah blah. We all sat in the big lobby. Once we got to Bangkok, they passed out one little glass of beer, and Bangkok beer is stronger like German beer is, and boy, by the end of that glass I was saying, yes, let's party already. A friend of mine had recommended a driver for $35 a day, and I mentioned that for the end of the story. And I guess we went at that particular time. There was a place to go and meet girls, and you could pay for the girls' tuition by the day or by the week. And I had chosen to do by the day, and again we went to different places. The driver took me to get suits, and I got new suits made. We went to plays, restaurants, and the girlfriend and I, and we went to different places and just had a great time. And the very last day was that I had spent everything I had. I have $1 that I still have this day that actually I had a little bit of money, but the driver gave me $10 out of his $35. So obviously somewhere in this thing he's made some money. To take a cab ride or take the boat ride with my girlfriend down this canal. Well, actually it's a river, and it goes by Buddhas. It's just in little fat things. It was like a little gondola with a motorboat in the back. They pulled up, we came up this little bridge, we got off and walked onto the pier and came up, and it had a little bridge. Along with that bridge was a restaurant built along with it. Half was a restaurant and half was a bridge. And a man met me at it and said, "Oh man, want to go fishing?" I saw people sitting along the canal with poles and a thing, and there's people sitting at the restaurant eating and drinking and so on and so forth. And he threw a big old ladle of guck in the water, and a bunch of these fish came up and so on and so forth. But it was just kind of an interesting place. So we sat there, ate dinner. They had a ring out. Of course, they had a couple of adult doing some kickboxing, Thai kickboxing. A couple of teenagers that came out and did a couple some Thai kickboxing. They came out and brought a rooster, and they threw in another rooster, and they had a cockfight in the middle of the ring. And they brought out a bar stool and set it in the middle. And another guy brought out a fish bowl. Another guy threw in, and there was a fish swinging around. Another threw in a bait of fish, and the fish fought. And so it was very entertaining places for a number of reasons. But yeah, I had a heck of a good time. Just fascinated. Bought, other than the suits, could have bought gold and jewelry, I understand, and all kinds of stuff. But 7 days, I was back in Vietnam.
So you were there for a couple more months, and then you were able to go home to Sacramento. Could you tell us a little bit about what it was like returning home and how you felt about your service after you had gotten back?
Well, I have to put the one silver lining in the whole thing. Again, I knew service was getting blamed for it all. The individual soldier, Marine, Navy person was getting blamed. But again, it didn't particularly stand out on me. But I was just concerned about getting home. So I went up to the airline to get my ticket, and they said all the regular tickets are booked, but you can get a first class ticket for twice as much. All of $48 from LA to Sacramento cost me $48 first class. And it was $24 on a regular flight. So when we were waiting in the lobby prior to boarding, there was a whole bunch of Air Force and a whole bunch of Army, and every one of them single ribbon, you know, just fresh out of boot camp servicemen. And I was the only one with any kind of fruit salad on their chest at all, and the only Marine. And somehow to this day, I don't know if it was loading or unloading, but I remember they were already seated. And the fact that I got to walk past all these servicemen going or coming from first class, I don't remember because it just sticks in my mind, was probably the proudest moment I had. After that, I came home, took my uniform up, and put it in a closet, and didn't look at it again. But you always end up with those new people you run into who ask all those stupid questions. You know, why did you do all those terrible things? You know, babies and children and setting, you know, and, you know, just, first of all, you had to set them straight. And second of all, it wasn't us. But we weren't particularly, it was upsetting in the fact that I half agreed with these people in the fact that they had no knowledge. I had no knowledge prior to going. And I knew at this time that our country's heart had not been in it. And I think that's what everybody thought over there. We could do this. Why don't we just do it? Just get online and sweep this place. We'll take care of it all. It just seemed like we were always held back like a pit bull on a leash, you know, just, we're just here for show. You know? And you might, a couple you might die, but you're just here for show. So
as we wrap up, could you tell us a little bit about all of the veterans organizations that you're associated with and kind of your experiences with that?
Initially, the VFW and the Legion wouldn't accept both the Vietnam veterans because it was a police action. Later, when it became announced that it was a war, they seemed to be more benevolent about accepting us. I don't think I was as interested as most people coming out of service getting involved in anything. We were just involved in the service, and that was enough. We wanted to lead our own lives and make our own rules and not belong to anything. I think it numbered to us. Out of some, I think the next time we actually got together, other than individuals I knew, the next time we got together in some kind of veteran organization was the building of the California Memorial at the state park, at the state capitol. And a couple of my buddies, again from the neighborhood, and a number of just thousands of people down there, and it kind of brought it back to us. Then a couple of years later, we had heard that someone had been damaging it. So I joined a group to guard it. And out of that, I think Chapter 500 Vietnam Veterans America started, and I joined that. I not only have joined the Vietnam Veterans and have been every position on the board, I think, there, including president and state delegate. I also joined the Veterans Affiliated Council and was again a number of positions on that board, and was the commander of that particular organization. I also belonged the AA Nichols Detachment of the Marine Corps League out of Folsom, and again, a number of different board positions, and I was a commandant of that particular organization. I also belong to, I now also belong to VFW, the Devil Dogs, which is another organization of the Marine Corps League, and the Purple Heart. I belong to that they're out of Folsom. We are celebrating our veterans nowadays, regardless of the war they're fighting, regardless of what they're doing, regardless of our government's idea of what they should be doing or what they are sending them for or what their goals are. These are our servicemen who stand up for us and ask nothing but directions. And I think that's the biggest thing, that we want to make sure that these people are taken care of, that these people continue to get the services. They were there for our country when we need them. We want to make sure our country continuously, I myself think that veterans benefits, and that each year the veterans money comes up on a budget. I think it's something that should just be mandatory. It should be, it's already, all there would be, it's consideration of raise for cost of the economy going up. Other than that, it should be chiseled and granted. This money should always go towards veterans hospitals. This money should always go towards veterans rehabilitation. This money should always go towards veterans education. These people are there for you, and many of them that were there for you are not here at all. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big thing. So yeah, now that I've grown up, gotten older, I've become more involved with veterans organizations.
Great. So we'll wrap it up there. That concludes our time here on Valley to Vietnam. I would like to thank Greg McNeill. Thank you for being with us here today.
Thank you, Christy.
And say welcome home to him and all of our veterans. For Valley to Vietnam producer Jerry Ward, director James Scott, and I'm Christy Dentry saying farewell and look forward to you joining us on the next episode of Valley to Vietnam.